Hello, I promised you a quick walkthrough of the stuff that I've been working with Docker, CircleCI, and Elastic Beanstalk. So I made this video for that purpose. This is now my third attempt. I think I should make a fourth video just out of the bloopers. I didn't think it would be this difficult, but I'm sure that I'll get through this somehow. Anyway, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our local Docker and Compose configuration, the Compose configuration on CircleCI, and exactly what I'm doing on CircleCI, the auto deploy and stuff like that. And then maybe just a little bit about the Elastic Beanstalk application and its environment, but it's not super interesting. I guess most time is going to be spent speaking about CircleCI and what happens there. So I'll just jump right into it. Maybe just the ground up. So what we're doing is we're deploying Docker images from our registry on Docker Hub, which is Sotec/Champaign Web for the main application and Sotec/Champaign AK processor for the worker. Deploying images is really simple because basically all you have to do is you specify this JSON file. This is a template, but it looks the same. You specify this file for Elastic Beanstalk where you tell that you want to deploy from this repository this image with this tag, and it needs this port, and for our application that's it. So like deploying Docker images onto Elastic Beanstalk is theoretically very, very simple, which is why we're doing it. We use Compose on our local environment as well as on CircleCI because we need Postgres for testing and for development. We don't need Postgres container on Amazon though, because we have RDS that's bound to the Elastic Beanstalk application, so we don't need the Postgres container there. However, we still need to configure it for Compose. And you can see that my local Compose configuration is different from my Circle Compose configuration. Circle is done here, so this is currently just for the local development environment. So this specifies two containers. One is the web and one is the DB. This tells it to build a container based on the Docker file on the current directory. Then it mounts the current directory as a volume to the container, which allows you to modify the code without having to rebuild the image. Then it binds port 3000 and hosts to port 3000 on the container. Please note that this is the same port as the worker uses on host. So you're gonna want to change that, otherwise you're gonna have a conflict. And this tells it that it's linked to another container, which is the database linked here. And it just sets a couple environment variables. Now this one tells that the container, the DB container, should build from an image from this source, and this is the official Postgres registry. It just tells it to run default port and adds an environment variable. And that's everything for our local Compose configuration. On CircleCI things are a little bit different. Where is that? Here. So this is our Circle YAML. It looks different now that we swapped to services Docker instead of Ruby or Rails, because when you're running a Rails application, it knows to assume a lot of things like what to run for tests and stuff like that. With Docker, there is more manual setup. For dependencies, we add or override a few things. First, this just prints out some system-wide information. Then we're using Compose, so we have to install that. We do it with pip. We also use pip to install the AWS command line interface, which we use for making a new application version and for deploying. And after that, we build the image that we want to use for the container that we're going to test. that we're going to run the tests on. Sorry. So this builds an image with this name, sotec/Champaign web. This has to match the name of our repository on the registry. No, sorry, the name of our organization on the registry and the name of the repository. Otherwise, it won't know where to push. It also has a tag, and the tag here is the current git commit SHA, which is accessible through an environment variable on CircleCI. And it just tells to build this image based on the Docker file contained in this directory. So this just builds a Docker image with this name, with this tag. Cool. So next we have to do a couple things. We have 2 YAML files where we have this environmental variable that we have to evaluate, which is why we do this environment substitution thing to actually generate the Docker Compose YAML and the Docker run AWS.json YAML, JSON that we use to deploy to Elastic Beanstalk. I'll show you how they look like. This is just a Docker run template. You see that it's got this value that needs to be evaluated, so it knows to pull the right image out of the repository when it's deploying. Otherwise, if it doesn't have a tag, it'll default to the one with the tag latest, and intelligently enough, that is not the latest image, it's the image with the tag latest. Beats me why it's like that, but so you have to evaluate this variable. Same here. We have to tell it to run tests on this image with this tag, because we have that locally since we just built that. If we don't specify that it has to use exactly the image that we have locally, it will start pulling from this repository instead of testing our local image, which is obviously disastrous because then we're not testing the thing that we're deploying. And then finally, it just tells to run the command associated with the web container on circle/Docker Compose YAML. And that is this container, and this is the command that it tells it to run. And this is a script that's in circle/run tests, and that's here. And basically it's just to set some environmental variables. Then it tries to establish a connection with the database, and it sleeps until it can, and once it has a connection, it's gonna run tests. And that's that for the test script. And if the tests pass, if it's not pushed to a production branch, then it just gives you the green tag that yay, this is good to go, ta-da. If it is, however, a push to a production branch, which is usually master and currently set to tools cleanup branch, then it continues with a few more things. First, it authenticates you on Docker Hub. Then it pushes your new image to our repository, the image that you just built and tested. And then it's going to call the deploy script with the current git commit SHA. And in the deploy script, it first makes a source bundle, which is the dockerized.aws.json file that we use for deploying. And it also contains this EB extensions directory, which can contain some extra configuration and scripts that I usually use for Linux servers, but you can also use them with Docker. And we need this because we also want to do migrations. Actually, we want to just check for pending migrations and run them if there are any, and that's done for us automatically by Rails. But I'll show this in a bit. So we give them the source bundle. Actually, yeah. So we send the source bundle to S3, to our bucket that's dedicated for our deployment configuration. Just basically the zips and Docker run files. Then we create a new application version on Elastic Beanstalk in our current application. And then we tell it to update the environment, and this is basically the deploy step. Now this thing that was in this app extensions directory that we have is a migrate script. And what we have is so-called container command. Container commands are something you can specify on AWS that are, as I said, meant for customizing Linux servers. And they allow you to run scripts after the container has been created, but before the application is deployed, or like before the environment update. And unfortunately enough, here in the command you don't have access to environment variables. So what you have to do is you have to write a script, which is here, and call that as a command, and that'll work. Don't ask me why, but apparently like that's the only way of doing this. Very annoying. So here I just basically specified a file, made it executable, I ran a command, which is honestly nothing but rake db migrate. It's just with all the stuff prepended to it, very ugly. But anyway, then it gets this gets called after the container is created. And then the environment should update just fine, like that. I can show you. So this is how it looks like on Elastic Beanstalk. I set this up so you can just click here. This is our Champaign core application. This is the web tier, which is the application itself, the platform. And then this is the worker tier, which is the Champaign ActionKit processor. It's currently in severe health just because it can't parse the messages that it's getting from SQS because they don't have language ID. Yeah, and then this is our repository on Docker Hub. This is the name of the organization, SOTAC. You can go here, SOTAC, and then you have Champaign Web and Champaign ActionKit processor. You can pull this, but you can only push if you have push permits, as in if you're a part of the organization. So if you want to deploy, then you'll have to have credentials that correspond to this organization.